Week 7 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few wide receivers. I have a sleeper option this week. The first guy, Jamison Crowder of the New York Jets. Jamison Crowder, we know he's been one of the main targets this season for the Jets, even though he's only played in 2 ball games this year. So right here, he's got a tough matchup on paper versus the New England Patriots that do give up the 17th most fantasy points to wide receivers. But we saw last week CeeDee Lamb have a monster game for the Dallas Cowboys. And Crowder, he didn't play in that Week 2 matchup versus the Patriots. And this game, I think it's going to be a similar game script like it was in Week 2, where the Patriots get off to a big start and a big lead in this ball game, and the Jets are going to have to play catch-up. And Jamison Crowder, he's still a good route runner. He's still one of the best receivers, like I mentioned, on this Jet team. And the 2 games back so far for him, Week 4 versus Tennessee, 7 catches, 61 yards, and a touchdown. And Week 5 at the Atlanta Falcons, 4 catches, 24 yards, and a 2-point conversion. So right here, coming off the bye, healing from his nagging injuries, I think this week in New England, he definitely could reach double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues, and he's a good sleeper option at the receiver or flex position. The next wide receiver is Rashad Bateman of the Baltimore Ravens. So Rashad Bateman finally made a season debut last week versus the Los Angeles Chargers. 4 catches, 29 yards, and this is what this Raven team needs, in my opinion. One more receiver to go where Hollywood Brown is having a great season, and obviously Mark Andrews, one of the better tight ends in all of pro football. So right here, they versus the Cincinnati Bengals in a division matchup, and the Bengals give up the 19th most fantasy points to wide receivers. But I think Bateman, he can make a few plays in this ball game. And with a lot of injuries this week and people on bye, he's not the worst of options, in my opinion, and definitely a sleeper option who's still out there in 72% of fantasy leagues. And the third and final wide receiver I have as a sleeper this week's Russell Gage of the Atlanta Falcons. So right here, Russell Gage, he's been a forgotten guy, in my opinion, in Atlanta and fantasy football circles. So Russell Gage last season, he was pretty solid for fantasy football owners. He did have 72 catches for 786 yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. And this year, he's been banged up, except playing only 1 game in Week 2 with Tampa Bay. 5 catches, 28 yards, but he returns this week in Week 7 at the Miami Dolphins. And the Dolphins, they've been getting torched by wide receivers all season, giving up the 3rd most fantasy points to wideouts this year. So Russell Gage, he's going to be the number 2 over there. Calvin Ridley, he should be back in the lineup. And hey, it's more weapons for Matt Ryan in this Falcon offense that's looking to get back to 500 this season at 3-3. So I think Russell Gage in this one, with no limitations, could have a decent ball game, and it wouldn't surprise me to see him have 60 to 80 total yards in this game and possibly find the end zone. And he's available still as well in 93% of fantasy leagues. So that's a few wide receivers I have as sleepers here for Week 7 of the fantasy football season.